Hello and welcome to a very special episode of MMO Weekly, presented as always, Cheesesteaks. I'm your host, Sal Manzo, joined by MMO Executive Editor Mike Mayer. And Mike, game of the year, Francisco Lindor. I think we know he has back problems because he carried the Mets all year. Clutch home, Diaz implodes in the eighth. If you want to know what it is to be a Met fan, that game is it in a nutshell. And the fact that they win like that in Atlanta, they exercised some deep. It was probable. I did not see that happen. But they held on, and this team is going to the playoffs. And more importantly, they only taken an hour playing to Milwaukee. Mike, let me get your thoughts on what the hell happened today.
Yeah, I mean, for the first 7 innings, it just looked like another Mets collapse, right? Like Schwellenbach was completely dominating the Mets like he has his entire career to this point.
Sure.
And then the magic of the 2024 Mets happened. Iglesias right in the middle of it, of course. And other big hits like Nimmo with the big home run. And then you're like, all right, well, yeah, this is game, right? Because then you just got to get 6 outs from like a combination of Maton, Buto, Stanek, and Diaz, and they only have to get 2 runs. They have some wiggle room. And then for Diaz, I mean, I I think the Diaz struggles really go back to yesterday when he pitched in a 5-run game and
Yep.
threw quite a few pitches when it wasn't really
Yep.
necessary. So that kind of came back to haunt Mendoza. And then, so for the Braves to take the lead, obviously you're like, well, yeah, this is just another one of these Mets collapses again. And then it, it couldn't have been anyone else, right? For Lindor just to hit that home run, just put a cap on what was, if not for Shohei Ohtani having a historic season, what would likely be an MVP season for Lindor. So for him to hit that, and somehow all of that feels like it's somewhat sane to the fact that Diaz came out and pitched the ninth inning. I was utterly shocked. I mean, so
Same
when
here.
he,
Same
when he
Same
entered
here.
the ninth inning, he had thrown 50 pitches
Yep.
in less than 24 hours, and obviously did not look good in the eighth inning when he was pitching. So for Mendoza to go with him, and obviously we found out Diaz pretty much told him like, look, this is, I want to do this. It wasn't easy. It was shaky, but Diaz got the outs they needed and they won. And you talk about exercising some demons in Atlanta because of everything that's the Mets history there. They exercise those demons with Travis d'Arnaud at the plate too, who has
Sure.
absolutely killed the Mets since he left New York. So for Diaz to come back, get the shutdown inning to clinch the playoffs, d'Arnaud with the last out, it's just, I mean, if you told Mets fans that script before today, like there's no way they would have thought it possible. I mean, it's what the Mets season was, though, right? That was the Mets season all rolled up into one game. Just a roller coaster of extreme highs, extreme lows, just craziness that you wouldn't think of ever happen. And that was the one that they finally used to clinch. And like I know David Stearns talked about it after the Braves clinched and they were all allowed to celebrate. He talked about the fact that he grew up a Mets fan, so he knows just what it means to not only clinch but to be able to get that win and do it in Atlanta because of the demons that they have there. So that's a huge step for obviously this season, but maybe finally gets the Mets over the hump in Atlanta where it's not like this gloom and doom every time they go there for an important game.
Yeah, right. I mean, once Diaz implodes in the eighth inning, I mean, really so inexcusable not covering first base. Really, it starts there. They're out of the inning. You think it's fair or foul or not, you have to cover the bag as a pitcher. And I give Diaz credit for going back, wanting the ball, obviously wanting to right that wrong. I agree with you that I'm shocked for him to see him go out in the ninth. I thought it was going to be Buto or Stanek. But Mendoza, who's likely, I think, at this point, manager of the year. I think it's safe to National League. Went with his guy. Obviously, you saw him went on the mound, eighth inning, talk Diaz, talk through whatever they had to do, and got the last two outs there. And like you said, Treno being the one to make the out, very fitting until Lindor, of course, who made the last out to them. But just so much resiliency. Tyler pitched a great game overall. I thought. Up when they needed it, and the Mets made the right move starting him in the first game, obviously. And the bat woke up when they needed to. Obviously, you talk about Nimmo hitting at that point, putting them up 3 runs before the 8th inning, getting hot. And Lindor in the 9th inning, obviously it's doom and gloom at that point. I almost felt like I don't know how they would have been to have played that second game, basically just changing uniforms and then going out there after, devastating loss that could have happened. But Lindor, made the joke with his back the whole year. It has to be him. It seems like he was always up in the big moments of the year for Mets, and he's more not really came through. And for some, has hit so many feels like clutch home runs, go ahead home runs, and hits this year. Has the most trot around the bases ever, like you knew it was going to happen. It's really, really cool to just his maturation in New York. Obviously, it started out great. He had his struggles, but he seemed to have really navigated the city really well and be in the face of the franchise. I don't know what's going to happen down the road, but I think is the unofficial captain of the team and someone that'll probably get that to him at some point and pass down. You can't talk enough about what Lindor has done for this team. I think is any naysayers that started with Lindor, first coming his first couple of years, I think that's all put to bed, because not only does he play every day when he's able and really wants to be out there, he competes on both sides of the diamond at an elite level.
Well, and I just think, not only did he obviously have the big home run today, he had big home run the other day, and he's doing it. He's obviously not 100%.
Sure.
Everyone's made it pretty clear that when he's out there, that he's still going through some pain, and we've seen it at times. When he scored a run the other day, he was basically like trying to get himself up so that he could get into the dugout. We saw it on some throws in the Milwaukee series where he obviously didn't get much on it when he normally would. So, not only is he just going out there and getting all the big hits, but he's doing it clearly not at 100%. And to it, everything you said times 100, like this is Lindor's team now. I think it's only a matter of time before probably next year they do give him the actual captain, because it's pretty clear that's what he is anyway.
Mm-hmm.
And you're talking about the guy who's the MVP, if not for what Ohtani did. So for Lindor to come back, not healthy, come back and be a big part in the 2 wins that the Mets needed. That's what they ended up needing, was 2 wins, and Lindor was the big piece. And then like you mentioned, McGill. It's tough to understate just how much the Mets needed McGill and David Peterson.
Sure.
And that's another thing that's crazy to think about. Go back into spring training and say that Tyler McGill and David Peterson pitched the 2 biggest wins of the Mets season. And people would have been like, well, the 2 biggest wins to do what? Get to 70 wins? Like,
Sure.
It's insane that obviously Peterson had one of the best performances of any Mets pitcher in a clutch situation, going back to, it was on the anniversary of the John Maine game. So it seemed pretty fitting. And McGill, he not only, he gave up 2 runs, but that was a pretty gutsy performance from him to bounce back and to get the Mets innings. Because that worst case scenario, what he was doing at that time was eating innings so that Mendoza didn't have to use bullpen that he would want to save for the second game.
Right.
And I think you got to give Mendoza props for pushing McGill. He knew he needed more outs out of McGill. after the 2-run homer. I mean, he still got into some trouble a couple of
Yep.
times after that, where in some situations you might pull McGill, but Mendoza knew that he needed to get outs out of McGill just in case they lost that game, so that Diaz, Stanek, Maton would all be fresh for the second, what would become a monstrous game for the Mets. I mean,
Yeah.
that it would have become winner or lose for the season. So McGill did great on the backs of Peterson doing great. And one thing I think about too a lot when we're thinking about just the craziness of the Mets, they got this spot and Senga pitched one
Right.
game.
Sure.
Senga pitched in part of one game. So to be able to do what they did, I mean, obviously a lot of credit goes to David Peterson, who pitched to a 2.90 ERA this year. McGill, who pitched really good down the stretch for the Mets. All the other starters that have had good seasons for them. And that goes back to David Stearns, right? For him to be able to get the depth that they did on the free agent market, so that they were able to withstand Senga being out. And then we'll see where that keeps going, because the Mets are certainly going to rely on their starting pitching to have, if they want a chance in the wild card.
Yeah. I agree as far as with the point with Stearns. I mean, you have to be excited not only for right now, but what things are ahead. Obviously thought of as a transition year, right? We thought about it in the winter. That's necessarily didn't make the sexy big sign when did his first couple of years. It was a bit more reserved. They tried that kind of route. It didn't work out. There was some dead money on the books. So Stearns coming in had to make some more, ceiling savvy kind of veteran signings that I think at a first glance, even I thought they did not have enough starting pitching depth to go into the year. But teams that even certain guys give them the tools to kind of succeed, and if they're healthy and also can play, a little bit above them than what you expect, this is what happens, and good teams have that. And it's exciting to see that happen for the Mets now. I feel like we don't really have that happen. So you got Stearns a lot of credit for really, looking at guys that were healthy. Could contribute, really be able to bounce back. To, a lot of credit to him, and it's exciting. I think the way that up, we're not getting ahead or anything, but just what Stearns really do with Cohen's back, to speak. I'm not getting ahead of ourselves at all, but I think we should, as fans, be excited for what they have here between Mendoza, and this is a partnership. Not a lot of folks saw kite. I don't think Mendoza first choice for manager. We know that too. He's going to end up being manager through the years of rookie. So a lot of credit to Stearns, his people coming in and Mendoza, and it seems like it's a group that really gelled. I love playing for one another. Calling them the Goonies. I've been calling them that all year because they never say die. This group never says die. They're never out of it. Anyone in money might take a T-shirt of that. Give me some money. Give me a cutback. It's good. But it's really incredible. And at this point, they're playing with house money now. This is a team, obviously in Milwaukee, they just played. But things are different now in a wild series. They have momentum playing these couple of games. You have 7 full rest. Great. I point, you really could be excited a little bit of. I really think they could make themselves out of a wild card series, especially not having to fly to San Diego now.
Yeah, I mean, anything can happen in these short little wild card series. I mean, I think 2 years ago you would have expected the Mets probably to beat the Padres
Sure.
in that series. We've seen in recent years wild card teams make good runs, so that's why it was always. I mean, when people are talking about, well, the Mets are, even if they get in, they're kind of backing in and that type of thing. But it's like it really just doesn't matter. The Diamondbacks lost 4 straight games last year before to finish the regular season. The Rangers weren't. They went like something like 3-6 in their
Yep.
last 9 games. So you just get a talented team in the playoffs and playing well, and you see what can happen. And right now, I mean, a couple of days ago, you had been Mets Twitter was doom and gloom, but a couple of big wins changes everything, and you get a couple of guys. I mean, JD Martinez had a couple of good at bats today, so hopefully he's finally out of it. Even Pete Alonso had a couple of good at bats the last couple of games. I mean, just there's a lot of positives. I mean, just Francisco Lindor being able to do what he can, having him back healthy is obviously a great thing. I mean, you got someone like Tyrone Taylor that's
Hmm.
playing like one of the better players on the team right now. So, look, they've don't have a lot of success in history versus Milwaukee in Milwaukee, but I think a lot of that stuff goes out the window when we're talking a best of three series. There's just anything can happen, and it's not like this is the Brewers that have um, Burns and someone else behind him at the top of the rotation. Peralta has struggled since he hasn't been the same guy since a really good start. After that, they're not even sure who's going to start after him.
Sure.
They don't have a big number two or a big number three, and they also, I mean, they don't have I mean, outside of Adamas that and Contreras, Adamas and Contreras, they don't have a ton of power.
Sure.
Obviously, we saw they're going to be aggressive on the base pass against the Mets, and that's obviously I think one of the big keys to watch for is. I think the best thing to do is just keep those guys off base.
Sure.
Guys like Turang and some of the other speed guys, they aren't high on base guys. So if you can just keep them off base and turn them into a team that's only got to get home runs from the two guys I mentioned, Contreras and
Sure.
Adames, I think that's really the best way for the Mets to beat them. And I think I mean, obviously it stinks that the Mets had to play today right before they play a game tomorrow, but and there's not really momentum in baseball, I don't think real that much. But obviously, coming off that type of win to clinch, the Mets are they're gonna be pumped up. I mean, how could they not be? And to have Lindor do what he did, I think the Mets are gonna go into Milwaukee believing that, like I said, you just got to take two games, two out of three games, and you move on to the next series.
Yeah, no, I don't know if I necessarily momentum not being such a thing. I think before the Mets are on a heater. They obviously had the first game in Atlanta, but a little bit that the 2 days off kind of let the air out of the balloon, so to speak, when they got to Milwaukee. I felt like at least for most of the half that the Mets were momentum hot teams, things were going their way. Hopefully continue, like you said, we'll see here, especially in a 3-game series, anything can happen. But you mentioned Alvarez there defensively a little bit. That is something I'm going to key on as far as you mentioned the Brewers over the weekend ran a lot on the Mets. Alvarez. It seems, and it's not something you're going to change now. It seems like when he's on a knee, he's really not mobile side to side, especially runners on base blocking balls. That seems like it could be a bit of a concern. It's something to watch. But like you said, if pitchers are keeping guys off base and they have to play home run game, then that's to the Mets' favor, and hopefully they can kind of do that. But it's going to be really interesting. I think that, like you said, the starting pitching goes to the Mets. The fact that out of all this, have Luis Severino full rest, they really couldn't work out. Probably, obviously, you'd want to start ahead of time, but you didn't know he would play until the. But as things go outside of Diaz, probably not going to be available. You said the Mets playing today. It's up as well as it could with the circumstances for Game 1.
Yeah, and I think outside of Diaz, I think probably the rest of the guys are pretty. Maton's pitched a couple days in a row, but the rest of the bullpen looks like they're probably good to go, pretty fresh. So, and I mean, Severino's been, I mean, he's been solid to get you 6, maybe 7 innings,
Mm-hmm.
a fair amount this year. So I think if you can get 6 innings out of Severino, I think that puts them in a pretty good place to take that first game. And obviously, I mean, it looms pretty large to take the first game when
Yeah.
you only have to win two. So, uh, and I think we talking about kind of exercising the demons a little bit. I think the Mets did that a little bit too in their 5-0 win over the Brewers in the last game of that series. I think
Sure.
that's certainly a big step too, because like I mentioned, the Mets have struggled in Milwaukee, so to be able
Hmm.
to get
Hmm.
that 5-0 win to end that series, I certainly think that's another thing that at least can erase some doubts in any Mets players' minds or anyone's in the organization minds. Like, yeah, of course we can do this. We just beat these guys
Right.
um, just the other day, and so look, it's like you said, kind of wrapping that whole thing up is look, the Mets weren't expected to be in the playoffs this year. Um, it was supposed to be a transition year. It was supposed to be a year of kind of Stearns getting his feet wet,
Hmm.
getting his step into the organization and doing what he wanted to do. Getting Mendoza just through his rookie season, right, so that he can earn the experience necessary. Um, Getting some of these prospects up, getting some things going in the right direction, and they've certainly done that and a lot more. Like you mentioned, Mendoza is certainly going to be in the running for manager of the year. Um, Stearns has done a great job in his first year, and that's just something to build on. This gives you the confidence throughout the organization, and I'm sure Steve Cohen's feeling it right now that,
Sure.
oh, hey, I know it might have taken us a while to get to David Stearns, but we got there and we got the right guy
Sure.
finally. And
Sure.
now we know that, and he picked the right guy in Mendoza. So this is just the start of something that could be a nice run for an organization that has certainly needed one and could go on one, because you mentioned those two things, but then you have the Steve Cohen money, which we'll get into all of that once the postseason's over even more. But it today really hit home to where that those two worlds kind of collided, where the future and this season, and this is a team that can make. I mean, getting to the postseason's great, and they could make a run.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. What do they say? You have to get in the tournament now, and especially the way it is. It very really is kind of tournament stuff. It's going to be really interesting. Really interesting. And it's largely with Pete Alonso, is really not doing much. So if one of those two guys can get hot in a short season, they could really leapfrog the Mets. To really a deep run in October, which I'm sure would sign up for. But at this point, this is house money right now. Hopefully the Mets series, I'm sure the Brewers want to stick it to their old president, David Stearns, hopefully, but should make for an interesting series. And like I said, I think we all end of May, if you would have said that the Mets had 89 wins, one of the wild card teams would have signed up for it in an instant. So I think this is a night to enjoy it. But playoff baseball starts 5:30 tomorrow. Whole slate of baseball. But should be a really, really, really interesting, 3 games at least in Milwaukee.
Well, I think, and we also, before we go, we got to give a shout out to the Churve, right?
Sure,
Um,
sure, sure.
just to come out of nowhere, I put out a tweet there that he had been pushed out of the Triple A rotation. He was in July after a bad start. He was pushed into their bullpen, and he hasn't pitched 6 innings since Independence Day. And the 111 pitches he threw today against a Braves team that needed to win, had to win
Right.
to extend their season. He threw 111 pitches today in 6 innings, and that's just obviously a great thing for him. It because it could look good for the next team he's on and everything, but it also that's huge for the Mets. That was
Sure.
for him to be able to soak up 6 innings in a
Yeah.
game that was absolutely meaningless for the
Right.
Mets,
Right.
so that
Right.
they didn't. I mean, the Braves, who are a very good offensive team, could have very well have just blasted him in the second or third inning.
Sure.
And then Mendoza is like, well, what do I do here? How long do I leave him out there? Who do I go to next? So for him to be able to squeeze out 6 innings
Yeah.
and then essentially go to other relievers that aren't going to be used or even used in high leverage at all in the
Right.
next series, that that's a big thing for Joey to be able to do for the Mets.
Yeah, absolutely was. He, stepped up. Obviously, in a game that a lot of folks after that first game maybe pay attention to whatever, but really like 6 quality innings got them to that point. You don't have to burn anybody important. Keep yourself as fresh and going into tomorrow. Just really, wild day. Well, absolutely, this was the game of the year. Anybody different, they're lying. And, they're in the dance, and now all you can, hopefully for a run here. But this should be a season that we enjoy, and hopefully, we can enjoy these, next 2 or 3 games coming up.
Absolutely. And I think, hey, why not throw some predictions out there, Sal? What do you think's going to happen in the Brewers series? Who do you think the Mets win or lose?
I think the Mets win in 3 games. I think they're riding a hot hand. I like the side of I like that they didn't sweep the series in the side of the bracket that they're now on. I think it's a much path. I think that the path to Milwaukee and then Philly in the division series lines them up much better than being on the other side with San Diego and the Dodgers. So I have the Mets winning in 3. I'm just hopeful, but I see a team here, has shown resiliency all year for another 3 games.
No, absolutely. I agree too. I think the Mets win in 3. It just doesn't feel like that type of season that's just going to
Sure.
end in wild card disappointment. I think I don't think the Brewers are any team that's going to crush the Mets. I think they're pretty evenly, these two teams.
Sure.
Certainly better not to play the Padres right now. I think the
Yeah.
Padres are very good. So
Yep.
I think they've got a good chance. I think they're going to win the series. And then like you said, I think they definitely got the better draw of the wild card team. So yeah, I like them in 3 games too.
We'll find out starting from 5:30 tomorrow. I really can't believe it. Awesome ride, awesome season with you, obviously. Enjoy doing this and speaking and doing this with everybody. Catch you after the Brewers series. Hopefully, we're recapping a series win, and they're going on to play the Phillies. But between now and then, as always, let's go Mets and enjoy the ride, folks.